Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 58. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented, who continues to subscribe to the show, rate it. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment provides first-class weight rooms and has earned an exceptional reputation of providing the finest quality design and customer service. Being a direct manufacturer, the team at Samson brings full customization capabilities and not only branding, but in custom equipment needed to execute your project. From racks, barbells, and plates to dumbbells, benches, flooring, storage, and more, Samson Equipment is durable and made to order from premium grade materials, all built from scratch, start to finish. Samson Equipment provides professional weight room solutions for all your strength and conditioning needs. See the Samson standard for yourself and learn more at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank Cerberus Strength. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use our promo code strength_game at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at cerberusstrength.com. And in this episode, we're joined by Coach Zach Fierce. Zach is the assistant AD for sports performance at Southeastern Oklahoma State. Prior to arriving in 2019, he served as the head coach at Lincoln University in Missouri since 2017. Fierce got to start coaching first as the director of sports performance in the private sector at Sterling Sports Performance in Pella, Iowa, before getting into the collegiate sports working at North Carolina State University. He then spent 2 years as a graduate assistant at Winona State, one as an assistant at Abilene Christian, and from 2014 to 2016 as the top assistant at Missouri Southern State. In addition to his coaching responsibilities, Fierce is currently completing his doctorate in strategic leadership. Fierce himself is an avid lifter with dedicated time under the bar. He was a competitive Olympic weightlifter for 10 years and still enjoys training daily. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Zach Fierce. What's going on, everybody? Today, I'm excited. We've been chatting for a little bit before this show actually kicked off. I've got Coach Zach Fierce on. What's going on today, Coach?
Just taking a little downtime with, our little May period. We get the breaks, so trying to recover a little bit. Not doing a great job at it, but trying to sharpen the knife a little bit, using the stone a little bit. But I've been looking at kind of a couple things so far, obviously going through my class and all that stuff. But the big thing I've been working on right now is trying to change a little bit of my programming for the summer. I've got a few things I want to get set up, and I've been doing more research. Currently, the biggest thing I'm looking for is trying to change my lateral change of direction day for running. And kind of, that's one thing that as I've evolved and I keep moving things and changing things, that's kind of my big focus for this off period is kind of learn a little bit more about volumes and drills, some stuff I can change. Try to get our guys a little bit better at stopping, changing direction. We're pretty fast forward, but I think we need to get a little bit better at breaking our hips, changing direction. So that's kind of been my big focus last few weeks. I need to do a better job because you get a little downtime and it's a little easy to let that freedom go to your head, because I got 2 weeks to the day before we start our summer workouts. So I kind of got to get rolling on this stuff.
Yeah, you're a busy man. You got a lot of stuff on your plate. You wear a lot of hats. You got a lot of shoes behind you too. And I know we'll probably get into a little bit of the stuff like with your position, your coaching role, kind of the changes that's going on, as well as things you're doing outside of strength conditioning along with your PhD. But really want to start off by like figuring out how you really got involved and started in sports training and eventually competing in Olympic weightlifting up into your career now.
Yeah, that's quite the tale. I look back and I have no idea how I've been doing this for 15 years. First of all, I'm from a little tiny town, Southern Iowa. I graduated in 2006 from high school, and I cannot believe it's been that long. But I look back and I remember I always had this passion. I love lifting weights. But it almost all went to bodybuilding because that's all I knew. We didn't have a strength coach. We didn't have anything like that. Our football coach would write everything was 3x10, 3x10, 3x10 on the board. And, so I just kind of did that. I didn't really gain a whole lot of size. I was very, very undersized, coming out of high school. And that was one thing that had I known more about it, I think I could have had a pretty good opportunity. Because of that, I didn't end up actually playing sports in college, which a lot of people always sit there and assume I was a running back. Cause I'm depending where I'm at, I'm down a little bit of weight on purpose, but, I sit around 5'7", anywhere between 215 and 225 normally. So I'm kind of a thick guy overall. And everyone assumes running back. And I know I didn't play. I actually weightlifted in college. But most people sit there and they, I think a lot of athletes become strength coaches. A lot of people become strength coaches because that strength coach that led them there in high school or college. And I was kind of the opposite. I actually got in this because I didn't have a strength coach. And I always think, man, I could have done something up here. I'm never going to sit there and claim I would have been an NFL player or anything like that. I'm not. I wasn't that talented. But I do think I could have played competitive ball at like maybe a good D2 or potentially a small D1. I don't know, but that's what I think. And I can never prove that. That's one thing I always tell my athletes is never leave the what ifs in your mind, because I can't go back and I'm too old. My body hurts too much from too many years of lifting to do it. But that's what actually got my real fire in this, is to make sure that guys don't lose their potential and that they don't sit there and just waste it over 1 year, 2 year, 5 years. I think that's the one thing that really got me into this. So I was fortunate enough, ironically, I went to a little Division III school in Iowa, and I thought it was a really good fit for me. Looking at it, I went there for exercise science, and I'll be honest with you, I went there to my girlfriend at the time went there as well. But that didn't lure me. The good news is that she is still my wife. Well, she is my wife, so that was a nice little, it was a good situation where at least I didn't follow a girl and then we went our separate ways, and I regretted being there. But the funniest thing about it was, while being there, I met probably the most influential person in my life. His name is Jake Anderson. And he lives in Turkey as a missionary, but he was at Central College for, a good 10 or 12 years as the director there. And he came out of University of Iowa with Chris Doyle, and very, very influential person. Probably, in my opinion, he probably put more strength coaches in the field between about, I'd say 2007 to 2012 time than probably any other school in the nation. He basically did what Springfield College is doing right now, where it seems like everyone has some sort of tie to Springfield College. And it's not like it's this massive university. It's just a school doing some really good things. And that's kind of where I got my start, was, I guess, Springfield College 1.0 at Central College in Iowa. Jake Anderson is very, very influential. I'll reference him probably another dozen times just going through this meeting or this podcast, just because he was such a big person in my life, and so many others. I mean, to this day, I think I talked to probably at least 12 or 15 guys that I graduated with within a year that are still in it, from UCF to Tennessee to Minnesota to Oregon State to Mizzou. It's just all over the place. You hear Central College, and, it's I think 1,500, 1,700, 1,900, enrollment institution. It's crazy how small it was, but how many strength coaches are coming out of there. So to move on with that, after I got out of Central College, and I really got a good foundation, there's one thing when I run my internship program here, I try to do the same thing. I try to have a really good foundation, so guys leave here knowing the X's and O's. I think that's one of the things that Jake Anderson did really well. It was a very, very good combination of science and practice. And not to steal the book title, but that's something where it really comes down to it. A lot of times, you get these really, really smart people, and they understand basically the programming side of things. But then you get these, all practice side guys that, they understand how to deal with the athletes, but they don't understand the science. And you meet in the middle with those, and that's where you that's where you get your best coaches, the ones that understand people and the science behind it. But after that, I ran a private business for a guy in the same city, in Pella, Iowa, which is where Central College is. I ran a private business there for over a year. It was not for me. I'll be honest with you. I realized real quick working at a high school in the private sector was not for me. There were some really cool highlights. I got to work with some NFL players, some high level athletes there. That part's really enjoyable. But at the same time, there are times where I'm working with 5th and 6th graders who mom and dad think is going to be the next, first round draft pick at 11 years old. Meanwhile, the kid's trying to get out of everything imaginable. Go figure. But that is what it is. I think that's part of the career, and you kind of learn a lot going through these. After that, I was at NC State for a while. I was an intern there. Originally was going to take a GA position there, and then some things fell apart with the head coach. And so the head football coach and the head strength coach kind of got into it. The GA got wiped off the face of the earth, unfortunately. And so I was left treading water, trying to figure out what to do. I happened to call a buddy of mine that I graduated with from Central, and he got me a GA position at Winona State. So I think I have the most undulating career path you can ever imagine. Going from NC State, it was regimented. Like if you didn't have perfect technique, you better be all over this guy. To go to Winona State, and Jeff Renardi's the director there, and he's still the director. He's the director when I was there. He's been there for a number of years, probably going on close to 20 there. And he's a very hands-off guy. He's just do your business, get it taken care of. If you need to get out of here, just get your stuff done. And so it's very, very free, very, very loose. And that's when I really, really got into competitive weightlifting. I'd been competing for a few years, but I got there and I had a lot more time to train because it was such a loose environment. I did get a little bit crazy. I went true Bulgarian for about a year there. And that probably the most painful thing I've ever done in my life, probably the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm still probably having aches and pains from those training sessions, but truly maxing out on a daily basis, multiple times snatch, multiple clean and jerks. And my program consisted of snatch, clean and jerk, front squat, back squat. That was it for a year straight. And I can tell you a couple things. I got tremendously strong at the Olympic lifts. I also was more beat up than you could ever imagine. Go figure why, Ivan Abadjeyev's nickname was the Butcher. I can imagine why now. But I did have a lot of time to work on my competitive weightlifting career there. And it's something I really enjoyed, getting better and better at that. That was definitely my biggest gains I ever made. I think I improved over 2 years. I think I put, give or take, probably about 40 kilos on my clean and jerk and probably about 30, maybe 35 on my snatch after 2 years of just training heavy. There were also times where I found out right after we moved there as a GA, my wife didn't have a job yet, that we were pregnant, which was fun. And I remember having a conversation with my wife of like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to kneel down and play with my son. That's how bad my knees hurt. And so fun times there. Then actually after 2 years there, I went down to Abilene Christian. The director was Eric Overland there, and it was a total 180. Guy runs it pretty strict. It's pretty tight. And at the time it was me and him basically running everything, with one guy that come in to help with basketball a little bit here and there. And then, Abilene Christian's $56,000 a year to go to. Trying to keep interns, trying to keep people there was just a pain. We did have a couple really good interns that were there. Cam Prater's at SMU right now, great guy. Hopefully he listens to this. Cam, give you a shout out. And Caleb Withrow, he is at USC right now with football, and also another great guy that I probably need to call and catch up with. Those guys did an awesome job there, fought through a lot because it's a tough place to work. There's a lot. We just couldn't get a lot of help, and those guys they grinded, and I still respect those guys a lot because it was such a tough environment. As we got through that, that was a big learning experience for me. It was very different from what I've been used to, and that's one thing I think I learned probably the most at Abilene Christian when I was there. I think some of the things I learned was just how to be, while I was there, just how to be a much better assistant, and things I didn't do very well and things that I needed to change. And as we moved along, how I want to do things, how I didn't want to do things. I think both are valuable, but it's very, very tight, Eric Overland had a really tight grip on the program. He really wanted to make sure everything was done exactly his way, which was more of the Todd Rice way at NC State, and then polar opposite from the Jeff Renardi at Winona State. And then, ironically, I ended up at Missouri Southern for almost 3 years as the head assistant, and that was the exact opposite again. It was a very, very loose environment. I was there for about 3 years. Troy Jorgensen was the head there at the time. And it was just very much, you get your stuff done. You get it done, get it taken care of. It was a weird situation. Missouri Southern has some interesting things going on. It seems like there's always so much changes happening there the last few years. And as I was there, it was kind of, there was building and mending some relationships that had been broken in the past. I was really, really fighting hard to get. Our track coach there would not work with the strength staff at all. When I got there, we finally rebuilt a lot of those bridges. It actually ended up very, very successful towards the end of my career there. Ironically, when I left, I went to Lincoln University. That was my first head gig. I was there for 2 years to the day. And ironically, the team that I had helped build up at Missouri Southern is in the same conference as Lincoln University. And two of their best programs are track, both sides. And go figure, Lincoln is a powerhouse of track. They have been for 20 years, and they will be until that coach leaves. He's pretty extreme, but he knows how to win. So we'll just put it that way. But the ironic thing was, so I go to Lincoln expecting for track to kind of dominate like they have, and Missouri Southern turned around and beats them in conference and indoor. The one thing we did really well was we bought into the weight room at Missouri Southern. They were in there nonstop 4 days a week. And we got these small sprinters, sprinters are 165 pounds, and they're all squatting, 405 plus, cleaning 250 plus. We had some really good numbers for these small guys, and they turned around and actually beat Lincoln at the indoor. Now, Lincoln got them back at the outdoor when they got a little bit healthier and everything like that. But the thing we did there was we really bulletproofed their hamstrings. We did not have much injuries. We had one guy, a 400 runner, that kind of had so many hamstring pulls, it wasn't funny. He's about our only injury there. But at Lincoln, I guess I will tell you that's probably my best example of how to do as much as you can with very little. I had no budget. I had not a lot. It's a tough place to be. But I learned a lot. It was one of my first opportunities to sit there and do my own thing. And, I took over for a guy, and I think I changed everything about 180 degrees from where he was at, which I think the athletes did pretty well with it. They bought in pretty well to it. There were a lot of people upset when I left there. But the biggest thing for me there was we were very segregated. Strength and conditioning was in a totally different building from all the other sports. And it was just a really, really weird situation to be there by myself with no help. I had a GA for one day. My very, very last day there, I had a GA that I hired from Spain, in a completely weird, I guess, happenstance. Ended up being a great GA there when I left, though. Then after Lincoln, I got the opportunity here, and I came here. It was kind of funny, and I probably shouldn't say this because if my boss actually knew this, he might not enjoy this too much. But Troy Jorgensen, who was my boss at Missouri Southern, he actually ended up taking the sales position with Samson. By the way, if I ever call anybody out, I'm going to call it Samson more than anyone because they've taken care of me more than anyone. So at the end, when I give my tips and tips of the trade, using Samson is probably my number one. Samson shirt.
Oh yeah.
All right. But so Troy Jorgensen calls me and he goes, "Hey, Southeastern Oklahoma State University has this position open. I think you really enjoy it. I just talked to the AD there, Keith Baxter, and he seems like a really good dude. But I think he'd fit in really well there." And I actually was just about to look into, because at Lincoln, you have to be there, I believe it's 2 years before you can start doing their doctorate program. And their doctorate program is through Mizzou, because Mizzou and Lincoln are about 30 minutes apart, and it's an outstanding program. And I knew it was going to be a pain to do, but I just wanted to get it done. That's something I wanted to do for a few years. And so just as I was about to start that, I was like, "No, I'm not going to leave because I think this would be a mistake." And he goes, "Well, can you do me a favor? Just put a job app in there." And I'm like, "Troy, he goes, "Well, I'm trying to get the room there, and at least I can look good this way." And I think, now I might be paraphrasing here. He goes, "I kind of told AD you're going to put a job app in already." And maybe I'm making that up. Maybe that's just the story I tell or something, but I'm pretty sure he said that. And so I jokingly, well, I shouldn't say jokingly, I just took a cover letter that I'd written for about a year before, and I just changed, I think it was Mizzou or something on there that I'd looked into, and just changed everything from that to Southeastern. I didn't customize it. It's like I didn't know a thing about Southeastern, and I just sent it in. And well, Keith Baxter calls me, and I had just finished up a max set of 10 squats, like just racked the bar, and my phone starts ringing. It's a weird number. I'm like, oh, let's see who this is. And I'm sitting there and just, and he's like, hey, this is Keith Baxter, Southeastern Oklahoma State University, yada, yada, yada. He's like, hey, did I catch you at a bad time? I'm like, nope, just finished up a max set of 10 on back squats. He's like, I can call you back. And I'm like, no, I'm good to talk. So I'm catching my breath. And ended up really enjoying the conversation. I'm like, okay, sounds pretty good. And so long story short, had a really good conversation. He says, man, let's get you down here. And I ended up having some issues go on. My sister-in-law passed away unexpectedly, right when I was supposed to be having my actual interview. And so I was lost. I mean, I actually kind of lived with him for a while. Me and my brother pretty close. And so what ended up happening was I did the interview, and I don't remember a thing about it. I just cruised through it. I'm a pretty casual speaker, so I don't think anything, I don't think it was a bad interview by any means, but I just don't remember anything. Normally I could sit there and say, oh man, I said this, but I just complete autopilot and went through it. And then I'm going up to my sister's wake and funeral, sister-in-law, wake and funeral. And Keith actually called me after the interview, and he's like, hey, I want to give you the job. Like out of nowhere, kind of. And I was expecting, hey, I want to go down there and check it out. That's kind of how I like to do things. And so I told him, like, man, I can't do it without going down and looking at everything and checking everything out. I got to know what I'm working with here. I got to know the coaches, and they're all out and running around because it's right at Christmas time, and I'm just trying to figure everything out. So I just decided, I drove up from Jefferson City up to Appleton, Minnesota, where my brother lived. He's a pastor up there, and just a tough time for everyone. And we deadheaded back. Like I got back at 2 a.m, 3 a.m. And I was like, I slept for like 4 or 5 hours. I just jumped in the car. I'm like, I'm driving down. I got to get this figured out. Got down here, and it was just a very emotional couple of days trying to get everything figured out. But then basically what he offered, and as far as getting to start this program from scratch, getting to set up my weight room exactly how I want it. And if you see pictures of my weight room, I may be partial because I built it, but my weight room is freaking gorgeous. It is practical. It is functional. Technology is great. Size is great. Setup is great. I got to build this thing top to bottom exactly the way I wanted it. And I'll compare it against any Division two room in the nation, as far as what we have. I mean, we've got all the bells and whistles, and, my boss supports me heavily on that. That's something that, I think we've built that trust in. I think that's one of those things is, I don't want to get down on the list, but that's one of the things that I've done that's actually got us an edge over a lot of other schools in this conference is I built so much trust with our athletic director. He's okay putting money into this weight room, when he sees this is our best recruiting tool, because we can go through and we can tell him exactly what we're going to do. And we've got all the data to back it up. We've got all the stats to back it up. We've got all the guys and the progress picks to back it up. And it's a pretty easy sell when it really comes down to it. So that was a very long how I got here, but that's how I'm here. And I've been here for 3.5 years, going on 4.
No, I love it. That's awesome. I've heard different iterations of it, obviously, and speaking with you before, but to kind of hear all the little ins and outs and the nuances of you kind of developing yourself as a coach and learning things along the way, kind of the situations, unfortunate things that happen, the positive things that happen between kind of those coaching roles. Because it's easy if you just slap that stuff online and you're like, hey, this is my timeline and trajectory, like it doesn't tell any of the full story. So I love sitting down and talking to people and seeing what really makes them tick, because where you are in the process, like where you are, like right now, there was a process to get you there. And there's a lot of working things out along the way to kind of figure it out. Like when I was sitting here writing stuff down, I was thinking about my first time coaching. And And I went to a similar place like that Springfield and Central College. Like I went to Salisbury, which is trying to be up there, like one of those D3 kind of weirdo schools that has exercise science and somehow good athletics in a program. And I think you and I have a lot of similarities, like trying to run those internship programs and those coaching assistant programs, like basically just big mentorship powerhouses where you kind of see what at the end of the line, the benefit you got from coaching, and you want to find ways to give back as much as possible so the next crop of coaches can really come out. Is that kind of how you're kind of working your program, and how does that tie in kind of with your goals now as the assistant AD and director of sports performance there?
So no, actually I am huge on internships. So we run, what we're doing right now is we're doing things a little bit different this upcoming semester, just locking things down a little bit more. And we had 16 interns last semester. So for us to have that many hands on deck is pretty nice. That gives us a couple opportunities to let some of our older interns actually write some programming and stuff like that for small teams. We actually had 4 interns writing programs, of course, under our guidance here, for golf, which the guy did a great job. For our track and cross country team, did a great job. Cheer and dance, even, that was a new one for us. We didn't have work with them, but they both approached us. So we actually had one guy doing all those, did a great job with it. And then our tennis team, we've got a guy doing that. So that's one of those things that we had interns sitting there and learning how to do all the programming and stuff like that. Now, those guys that wrote programs with me for a year minimum to write programs. I don't just like, hey, you're not going to go write a program, but you don't have a clue what's going on. And we're probably going to be down a few interns this year, just out of changes and stuff like that. People graduate. Some people realize they don't want to be in this field the same way, or they want to do something else, which is fine. I understand that. But that's one thing we've set up here is we're going to really try to emphasize, creating a program here. I think my goal long-term will be to be like Central College was when I was there. We ran my senior year there, we had 32 interns, and that's something I want that number. I want to be putting people out into this conference. I want to be known for putting strength coaches out everywhere, interns everywhere. That's something I will continue to do. I think that's important. And as I tell athletes all the time, that's a big part of our recruiting spiels. It's not going to be me coaching 50 athletes. It's going to be me, 3 coaches that are basically acting at least as full-time, whether they're GAs, paid interns, or full-time assistants, and usually a good half dozen or more interns. Eyes on, making sure everything's done right. And we have 2 different types of interns. We want to be strength coach interns, and then we want to get our hours for internships. We want an experience, but we're probably not going to be strength coaches. And so we kind of gear those differently. One gets a lot more catering to them of, we have a 3-tier internship curriculum that they go through. And then the other ones get a little bit, they get maybe a few of the very basic stuff, but we're not going to go through everything with them. They don't want to be a strength coach. We definitely go through technique stuff because that's one of the big things the interns do is watch technique just like we do. But yeah, that's what we do with our internship program. And I plan on ramping it up even more. We've had a ton of interest. I think the best interns ever are former athletes. Unfortunately, sometimes coaches don't like that as much when you have an athlete that decides, hey, I don't want to play sports anymore for you, but I do want to be an intern. But they've grown a little bit more used to it. We had a little bit of an issue with a softball player that quit at the beginning of the season, and she did a great job for me. Well, I'm not upset that she quit, under the circumstances. I'm more concerned that she furthers herself in a career if that's what she wants to do. Now, it doesn't change anything. We make sure typically, she wasn't allowed to work with softball, stuff like that. But at the same time, she did a great job. So I don't think I made the wrong decision there. But it does make, coaches get a little bit, they get a little bit upset sometimes when they find out that they didn't want to be with them anymore. But they do still want to be in the weight room, use the weight room and be part of the weight room and love that stuff. And I think it's one thing coaches kind of get over it. Central College, that was half of our interns were former athletes, including myself. I didn't play at Central, but I was a former athlete, obviously. And I think that makes a big difference when the coaches start to realize how we're using them. Hey, we're still using them to better their teams and everything like that. They start to get a little bit more on board. But the initial, the issue we had with an older coach that didn't want to that didn't believe she should be anywhere near any of our teams or anything because she quit softball. That's not how I work. And I went through and made sure all the channels were good with our athletic director all the way down, and he just was not having it. But that's another story for another day. But I do believe in our interns. I think that's one of the most important things. I just actually, as I got here, it seemed like I had all young interns. We've turned out a few here and there, but my first, I think I just lost my first one. He was going to go do graduate work here, and I think I just lost him to high school down in Texas. So I think that's a great problem to have. He was actually writing my cheer and dance programs here. And I think that's a great problem to have when you've got a guy that's getting sniped by local high schools, and that probably tells us we're doing the right thing. Now I just got to find a new guy to write program for cheer and dance.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great problem to have. The only problem in return is retention, trying to keep them around. But I mean, any of those programs, you're going to have a lot of turnover. And the great part about it is you have a crop, like you said, last year, 16 to pull from. I'm sure there's a few of them that are going to stay and be retained the next year. And you hopefully you start to develop a pipeline and kind of a hierarchy within your program. And I know you've talked about it, and obviously you talked about like the facilities and everything that have kind of changed since you got there in 2019. Kind of talking about these internship program and your staff, how has that kind of developed over the years that you've been there? I know your title has even changed in your time over there as well. So what's kind of on the horizon, or what are you really trying to develop, and kind of how has the trajectory kind of improved since you've been there?
So our first weight room was give or take 2,200 square feet, 16 racks, no dumbbells. Well, very limited dumbbells. It was very interesting. And each rack had no more than about 385 pounds on it. It was very interesting, which is not the best setup in the world. And by the way, when you're doing any work outside, so they're full racks too, by the way, full racks in a 2,200 square foot room, 16 of them, pillars everywhere. It's like dodging barbells when I first got in there. And I tried to figure out any way to move the setup, and I could not figure out a way to change anything. So we kind of dealt with that room. I was supposed to be in there for about 6 or 7 months. Delays happened, COVID happened, and lo and behold, I was in that room for 19 months. And I'll tell you what, it was hard to keep people there for a couple of reasons. Number one, we were in our own facility. We were in our stadium, which doesn't have any, that's not where our coaches are housed or anything. It's basically got locker rooms, weight rooms, meeting rooms, concessions, and that's about it. And so we were just kind of there by ourselves, and people didn't really bother you too much, but that's not always a good thing. People like company once in a while. So we couldn't keep interns very well in there. We had a couple of decent ones, got one that I thought he was going to be the studliest stud I've ever had, and instead he like, man, this is not for me. Like, I get it, man. I get it. He was interning for me. I think it was over the summer, and he was there. And I asked him, I remember very vividly asking this question, like, sure you want to be a strength coach? I say that to my interns a lot. Like, you sure you want to be a strength coach? This is hard hours. These are long days. And he looked at me and he's like, I don't know, coach. And I knew right then it was over, which is okay. I'm glad he found out before he was trying to be in the field for 2 years, and I just, wasted that time. But after him, I had another one, former football player here. We kind of hand out this award. It's called the Wildcat Bat. And it's for basically the guy that just puts in the work and shuts his mouth. And he won that. He's actually coaching up by Oklahoma City right now at a high school, doing a great job there, doing things that are very simple, but creating pretty good results there. But when we got in this new room, everything changed. Everybody wants to be here now. So, I went from, it's kind of funny because if I look at my interns on the wall, there's only one intern, and that's the one that I'm pretty confident I just lost him actually yesterday to a Texas high school that I've had in that old room. All the other ones are new. Now, that happens for two reasons. Number one, our recruits who we get now because of the facility is totally different. I mean, we have upped our recruiting game drastically. But along with that, we've actually changed the target kids we're going after. Our new coaching staff for football have changed who we're recruiting very, very heavily, and in a very, very positive way. I mean, our football coaching staff, I'll talk more about later, I'm sure, but do things very, very differently in a lot of schools. We are bringing in great kids. We're bringing in great talent. If this school is not a powerhouse the next few years, I'd be dumbfounded. The only way I think that wouldn't happen is if someone snipes our head football coach, because he's very good. And, there's always that risk, but I think he's pretty happy here with what he's got. God knows he's the easiest coach I've ever probably worked with. He lets me do my thing, and he and I sit down probably daily to talk about anything and everything. He's been phenomenal. But to get back to where I started there, our internship program here started, it was very rough and slow. And then we got in the new weight room, which we got in here almost 2 years ago, and it's just taken off. Everybody wants to be here now. So it's actually pretty easy to recruit. Not to mention, we have the hyper program, human performance, basically kinesiology, exercise science, whatever you want to call it, same thing, 60 different names, same exact program. And all of a sudden he found out that, man, this place gets some really good reviews. Like, kids like being there. Well, now he keeps pushing more and more interns at me, so he's helped me out quite a bit. Now, some of those kids are just good at moving boxes and cleaning the weight room. But guess what? That's less stuff that my really good interns have to do. So I'm okay with that. But along with that, we've got some pretty interesting stuff. We're bringing in kids from all over this conference to intern with us over their strength coaches there. So something's going on pretty well, I think, which is a good sign. I'm not going to say which schools those are, but we have definitely had plenty of kids within our conference contact us about coming here to actually intern here over their institution. I really want to pick on some universities right now, but I'll leave that up. Not be that guy. But at the end of the day, it's taken off in a really positive way. And I think for the most part, they know the expectations we have. That's one thing with everything going on. I'm actually, for the first time, I'm going to actually pull back off myself running the internship program. I've given it to my assistant director this coming semester. Let him take it over a little bit to see how he changes it. And that's one thing, I've been doing the same exact template for going on 10 or 12. I shouldn't say exactly, but a similar template for 10 or 12 years. And he was under some very different coaches. So I want to see where he starts to direct it to. Obviously, it's all under my guidance. Everything's got my name on it, So if he's really successful, I'm really successful. But if he does a bad job, I also do a bad job. But I'm letting him take that over. And I'm actually letting I've got a GA, and whether I keep her or not, that's the $1 million question. She's done a great job here. If I'm lucky enough to keep her for a little bit longer, we're going to try to get her a part-time position here. But you know how females in the field are, man. They are so desirable. And they're gone. And I wouldn't be surprised if I lost her the next week or two, because I've already taken multiple phone calls about her, and she's still got a semester left for a master's. But if I keep her long-term, I'm actually putting her in charge of basically our continuing education, which we require all of our strength and conditioning interns to do. And with that, it just really lets us all grow together. And, especially our young guys, experience with some of our older guys know. And, I kind of already spoke on it, but my head assistant, assistant director, whatever we call him, he's a baller. I got him in, I think February, and yeah, he's been a big change in letting me do some things differently than where they were. Nothing is any of my old staff. It's not at all what I'm saying. He just does things differently. Brought a really different approach, which I can enjoy. I have my stubbornness. I think we all do as strength coaches, where I want my stuff done within this realm. But as long as you're kind of within my zone, I'm good with it. Don't go clear out here away from what I'm trying to teach. But he does a great job. He's the type of guy, and I think my whole staff is. That's probably the best thing. They're always what do you need done? How can I help you? That type of people. And if you have people like that, you're going to be very successful. And people are always like, hey, what do we need to do to make this the best? And that's one thing, I'm going to get in. We're going to start to redo a lot of things this semester, which is going to be fun. As far as, I already talked to you about the Cotter book. I'm a huge fan of that. And we're going to go through and re-examine those 8 steps with changing where we're at right now. I've sat there and I've been really pleased with the progress we've made. We had arguably probably the most successful year athletically, success-wise, that the school's had in a very, very long time. Conference championships, we had the 4th biggest turnaround in Division II history for football, made a bowl game, didn't make postseason, which is a little disappointing, but we went from a 1-win team to a 9-win team in one season. I'll take that. That's a pretty good turnaround. And that's actually, we utilized a lot of those Cotter methods, which I'll probably go over later on in here more so. But that goes back into the whole internship program too. It's the same thing. We keep the expectations high, and one thing, you wrote on here, and I'm going to probably jump into this question, but you sit there and you wrote, you take over a program, what were my objectives? And since this fits so well in here, we start talking about it, but it was sense of urgency was the biggest thing, is how do we put a sense of urgency in, and then setting a culture. And I'm going to give you the definition of a culture. And the one thing is I've been doing all this doctorate work, and I'm doing it's actually a DSL. It's a Doctorate of Strategic Leadership. And it's something that I long-term probably have the desire to either be an athletic director at a similar level, small D1, bigger D2, similar to where I'm at right now, or Division I, bigger school, assistant AD. I don't know which one I want to go for. Maybe it's whatever pops open first. That's long-term goals. I enjoy being here at the moment. I have a lot of really good things going for me, as I've already said. But the definition of team culture that I use, and I think this is what has led our team, and this was actually kind of our mantra. We had the old cliche, which is good to great. We had a good season last year. How do we have a great season? But we put a lot of things in, and I've continually said my definition of team culture. And it's kind of funny because I've looked for this definition for multiple years and I never found it. And I found it randomly reading through a leadership article. And this, to me, is exactly what a team needs to be. And it epitomizes what a team should be. I'm trying to make sure I'm not making up words when I say things epitomizes. Is that right? Whatever it is, it's the epitome of what I believe in. But I actually have it up on my wall. It's posted on my wall. It's, I put a lot of stuff on my wall from everything I do. I like things up there to remind me, all sorts of these things. But and Ilya, because I love weightlifting, of course.
Oh, there you go.
But the definition that I go for is team culture is defined as an organizational setting in which not only formal coaching occurs, but also most or a large segment of individuals in the organization practice coaching behaviors as means of relating to, supporting, and influencing each other. I got to make sure everything's got to be cited 100%. So that's Milner et al. 2020, page 239. So no, it's one of those articles that I never expected to find that in, but it actually has several definitions of different team culture, team leadership, stuff like that. And I live by that definition. And the reason why I live by that definition so much is because it talks about the way we need to interact as a team, how we need to interact as individuals, and how you start to build up a team. And so if you sit there and you understand, formal coaching, that's obviously us coaching the athletes, or our football coaches coaching the athletes, or even our administration working with the athletes. That's got to be. But then most importantly, and I think that this goes back to the old cliche of, I read it today and I don't know who came up with it originally, but it's like bad teams, no one leads, good teams, coaches lead, great teams, players lead. And the second part of this quote goes back to the individuals. So, most or a large segment of individuals in the organization practice coaching behaviors as a means of relating to, supporting, and influencing each other. And that just means that everyone's coaches. On a good team or a great team, everybody is coaches, including the players. And it doesn't stop in practice. It goes to supper. It goes to lunch. What are you eating? How are you paying attention to things? How much sleep are you getting? All those little things that we preach nonstop as strength coaches of trying to get our athletes to recover and do all this stuff. When the whole team starts doing it, magically you end up with a really good team. And I think it's really funny because we've got a point now where I don't have to do very much in the weight room when football's in there. I don't have to do very much in the weight room when it's basketball. I don't have to do very much with a lot of our teams because they're coaching each other so well. Well, that's how they've started to develop relationships with each other. And I think that's something that people really, really misunderstand is the more those guys start to coach each other, or girls, I don't want to say just guys, but the more they start to coach each other, the better team you're going to have because they're going to be comfortable coaching each other. And when you get comfortable critiquing each other, which that's all coaching is, let's be real, the better you get. And when you have a culture that's okay calling each other out, you don't want to be, you don't want to do it in a malicious way. You want to do it in a safe way. But when you have a team that's okay saying, no, that's not good enough. That's not what we're about here. This is what we're about. That's how you really start to create this stuff. And, that goes back into, if you're going through our Cotter, maybe I should review this really quick because, I'm a huge, I said I was going to get into it later, but I just kind of keep rambling.
Go for it.
One thing to the next. And you told me, hey, just ramble on, man.
Do it.
Ramble on. Going into Cotter 8 Steps, it's probably my favorite book right now, Leading Change by John Cotter. Really simple book, really easy read. It's one of those, I don't know what it is, 200 pages, very eighth grade reading. It's nothing complicated, but he does 8 steps if you want to do change. And the first one is establishing a sense of urgency. It's just making people understand they need to start changing now. My favorite part of that, I already said this to you earlier before we started recording, was says you got to create a crisis. You got to do something to get guys or the girls motivated. Like, we need to change, and I think that can come from a number of ways. Athletically, if you get a new athletic director, a new head coach, you have a bad season, anything like that, you can use that as a way to motivate these athletes. I think the one I've had with athletes before, and I tell you what, they didn't like it much, but it did create some urgency, is, hey, at some point, if the coach doesn't turn it around, like, your scholarship's not safe. You can't guarantee anything in the next year. And that's harsh to say to kids, but it is the truth. And if you can create a crisis where they understand that, look, we can't play for them. We can't go out there and hit the ball. We can't go out there and throw the ball. We can't go out there and block for a quarterback. We can't do any of that. They have to go and do it. They have to go win the game for us. They have to go do all this stuff. And when they start to realize that they're in charge of everything, it starts to create a little bit more crisis of, man, if the head coach gets canned, unfortunately, it does happen. There's no safe spot. There's no safe scholarships. They may just clean house. You can be all conference and they might get rid of you if they don't like you. And there is no safe zone except for when you're winning and doing it right. My boss quoted saying, at some point you have to create a culture and you have to win if you want to keep your job. You're not going to win without creating a culture, and you're not going to keep your job without winning eventually. You might get a couple seasons, you might get 10 seasons, who knows? But at some point they're just going to say no more. And, I say that to guys, and I specifically said it to our baseball team, and I will tell you what, they were up in arms for a few days on that one. But this is the reality. Like, hey, we've kind of sat the same winning percentage for the last few years. We got to do better than that. Well, we did. We had a much better year. It wasn't perfect. We had a much better year than we've had in the past. Is that the exact reason? No, probably not. Baseball players are pretty stubborn. They're hard to get through. We didn't get through all these steps with baseball, but creating a sense of urgency is really important. I'm going to go through the rest of it a little bit faster because you can look this stuff up online. I think I've got a little outline that I really enjoy going through. I keep this stuff on my wall too, because again, it's one of those things that I look at every now and then. I reevaluate what are our real goals, how do we get moving forward on that. And I think it's tough to do because a lot of coaches don't buy into it as well. And more importantly, they're just not as stubborn as strength coach. We're pretty dang stubborn, so that helps a lot when you're trying to create change. How many times do you sit there and say the same coaching cue in one day, 40, 50, 60,000 times? But again, sense of urgency. Number 2 is creating a guiding coalition. This is basically finding your leaders and then getting them to understand what we want to do. Number 3 is developing a vision and strategy. This is probably the single most important thing. This is where you use your guiding coalition. You guys get together, you create a vision, basically. And number 4 is communicating the vision. And at that point, it's basically you're trying to get these people to sit there and see this vision and be like, I want that. Like, I want what he's talking about. Like, that's what I want. And when you start to get that, that's how things are really going to start rolling. Empowering, basically, you're going to start giving other people more power. How do you get them to start rolling with what you're doing, giving them responsibilities, pulling obstacles out of the way, getting some of that stuff that stop progress out of the way, and that can be anywhere from, unfortunately, sometimes it's athletes, sometimes it's it can be employees, sometimes it can be finances. How do we figure this stuff out? Got to figure out a way to get those obstacles out of the way. Number 5, Number 6, short-term wins. You can't do all this work and not see any wins. Like, even if you're almost fabricating it to an extent. Now, you don't want to necessarily do that because, if you're making something up and someone can figure it out that you're making these BS numbers, you don't want that. But you do want to make sure people realize that you're seeing progress, that you're not just doing all the stuff, there's no progress. Short-term wins often comes from really good spring practices, really good spring games, really good just practice in general, good camp, really good buy-in, summer, lifting attendance. It could just be the attitude of the team. It could be a lot of things, but, short-term wins are going to slowly build it up. And how it is, snowballing, it's just a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. And all of a sudden you got this massive snowball that can't be stopped by anything. And then the last 2, I think, are really important because those are actually about kind of completing everything. And the irony here is that, according to Cotter, for the most part, this kind of is an ongoing thing. You can't just assume that it's going to, once you get there, it's done. Number 7 is basically consolidating gains and producing more change. At this point, you're going to make sure that you continue to get the best people in, better athletes in, so on and so forth. So you're trying to continue this change. You're getting more and more people that are supporting what you're doing. Unfortunately, you're getting rid of the people that aren't on here. I mean, it's a good thing, but it's never good to see people lose their jobs, stuff like that. Or that could be athletes, it could be administration, it could be coaches, it could be whatever it is. Anyone that's holding you guys back, you're trying to do that. And then finally, the last one is basically anchoring the new approaches and culture, and I think this is the one that it's constantly, that's where we're there, but we can't let up. And everybody sits there and a lot of times they'll get to about that 6 or 7 step, and they stop. They're like, we're there, like we're going to catch our breath, and they never finish. They never quite finish that. And the craziest thing is, if you believe what I believe in culture, research says it takes minimum of 3 to 5 years. And I think it might be in that book, actually, it says that. I think it is actually. Yeah. To create a culture, like a true culture. That means that's something that's going to go down to the next generation over and over and over. And with that, if you let up, you don't ever finish creating that culture. You got to be on it all the time. If we're going to use this as our standard, we can't ever fall below the standard. We have to uphold everything to that standard. And we can't say, you know what, we got really, really close. Like we're going to back off for a little bit, because often you won't finish. I think if it's like, I love woodworking. That's one random thing. But if you stop and like 90% of way through a project, it looks kind of good. Like, good, man. It looks good. It's not quite done. That trim probably could be better, or something. But you just never finish because, it's pretty decent. It's good. But the problem is, as I said before, it's not great. That's what you're really trying to get to. And then the thing about this is you've also got multiple of these going at one time. So when you're doing this, you're trying to change multiple things. Again, I said this before to you before we started recording, but if you only change one thing at a time and it takes 3 to 5 years to truly get some of this stuff done, you're going nowhere. Like I said, we're a 1 in 10 team. If you change one thing, congrats. We might be a 1 in 10 team or a 2 in 9 team again. You got to change a lot of things. You got to start changing all the different things with the expectations for a million different things, from GPA expectations to attendance, to really our players, to our recruits, to our attitudes, to just a million different things. And you see such a difference in our weight room. I think that's probably a big telltale, is you see the culture shift in a weight room. Like our guys are crazy. Like especially our O-line and D-line are absolutely freaking insane in the weight room. Like they all bring their own ammonia and like slapping each other on the backs. I mean, these guys are insane. Like we bring kids in as freshmen and they see it and they're like terrified of it at first. And then 6 months in, they love it. They're in the same thing. And, you sit there and you create a culture. I think that's really important. But, we're in a conference, and Division II in general, we're losing kids everywhere. The transfer portal has been just a nightmare. It's just crazy. But at the end of the day, we had one kid enter the transfer portal for football. Like one. That tells me something about what our football staff's doing, what we're doing here. Kids are loving it here. Otherwise, they'd be leaving in droves like everyone else. I hear constantly in our conference, 12, 15, 18 kids entered, even from really good schools. So it's like, I don't know how you fight back from that. How do you win that situation when you're losing, a dozen or more kids every single year? So anyways, that's my really, really long, completely off subject conversation about Cotter and all that random stuff. But
no, I'm glad you got all into that. I mean, I told you I'm not finished with the book, but I feel like I read most of it right then. So that was super helpful to kind of put a nice bow on it for me. And yeah, there's a lot of good things. Obviously, pick up the book. A lot of the resources you've been talking about. I know a lot of the stuff that you're going through with your PhD program is super beneficial stuff. I know you gave me some other suggestions too that I'm already going to drop in my Amazon queue for the future. But there's a few things that came to mind, obviously, from that, and we won't get into every single question because we'll be here all night. But thinking about this stuff, because we were talking before this, we're both kind of in the position where we're bringing more interns and like some part-time coaches and like coaching assistants in right now, getting ready for the season. A lot of coaches, when they come in and they're young, will kind of see things going well and like without having done any of the work and all the buildup. They haven't been there for 4 years like you have, where you really had to kind of put these steps in place, reevaluate the next year, chip away, constantly putting these things together. They didn't see what the 19 months of what the weight room was before. They're coming in and they're seeing everything clicking on full cylinders. You're sitting back kind of just making few like small little changes, and your guys are just getting after it. It's easy to come in and think that, hey, this is how it's always been. I don't need to do much. So how do you kind of coach them up? I know you got a big curriculum and everything on the X's and O's, and you're sitting on the other side where you've got a very good foundation. You've been coaching for a long time, that stuff is almost kind of second nature, where you just have to go back and relearn it. You're really learning the culture side. How do you bring them up to speed on, hey, this is not just happenstance. This is actually took a lot of work, and you still need to kind of start at the bottom and learn all these things so that now you can get on the page where the rest of the team is and kind of where the level I am, so we can be on equal playing field to coaching them.
So that's a very interesting topic, because this is something that came up pretty heavily the last few weeks, actually. Again, I told you I got a new head assistant here, and he's done a great job. And that was one of his things. He's like, because I've been so busy with this, unfortunately, it comes to meetings and, impromptu coaching meetings, which is about 2 or 3 a day, that end up being 2 to 3 hours often total. And then running groups and being here for all that stuff, being a dad. I got 3 kids and a wife that I like to see once in a while. And then running the curriculum and everything. That's something that actually my head assistant, when he came in, he's like, man, I really do think that's something we got to make sure these guys understand, is how much different this really is. Like you've got something here that's great. It's simple, but it's not always going to be this way. Even Jake Anderson, I told you I was going to reference him. He was very much, you basically determine how involved you are. And I treat it very similar that way. Now we have one thing we're really going to change here is mandatory hours. We're going to try to do more visits and stuff like that to make sure everyone can see a little bit of the other side of things too. Because, I think everybody here, we've gotten to a point. I don't have to sit there and use my coaching voice all that much. You know what I mean? I don't have to get on guys that much. And that's kind of we've talked about creating a culture nonstop, and that's what we try to do. Well, when you get a really good culture going, you just don't have to be that guy. You don't have to be the strength coach laying down the law 24/7. But that's how he did start out. One of our O linemen just took a O lineman GA at Missouri Western, and when he was leaving, he actually interned for me the last semester too. But he just wanted to get a little bit of experience, get some hours, stuff like that. Great kid overall. And he flat out told me, like, do you remember how many up downs we did our first semester? And now I will tell you, the only punishment I will do is up downs. I will never run a kid on the ring. It's just up downs. That's it. That's all I allow. And why? It's because they are the most pointless thing on the planet. Okay. I will never run a kid because I don't believe in running for punishment, because running is a gift. Running is the best thing we can do for athletes. If you want to talk about neurological, or any athlete that can run faster is probably going to be a better athlete. So I refuse to run athletes as punishment. The only thing allowed is up downs. And, but with that, he was like, we actually deserve it though. We deserve so much. I was like, well, I'm glad you say that, because it was rough that first, especially the first year. I have certain rules, like during warmups, no talking. Like I want you to focus on, we do a ton of FRC type stuff. I want you to take your time and feel out these positions. You need to feel the muscles doing the work. You need to feel the joints going through the 4-inch motion. You need to focus on this. And if you're talking, you just go through the motions. And what ends up happening is, guys understand that. They still understand this. They don't have to say too much. Freshmen come in and give them a couple of warnings. Shut up. I'm talking to warmups. Focus on doing what we're doing. You don't even know what you're doing, so you really need to learn how to do it. But going back to the interns, that's something that, I think we've had a big concern with actually going into this semester is, man, we've got these great facilities. We don't have to work near the hours because we have such a bigger facility. We've kind of changed the way it was as far as how many athletes we can fit in the room. It's double what we used to have. But this is not that way everywhere. And that's something that we're really going to address in this coming semester a lot more with our interns for sure, because we do have a great facility, great setup overall, but we didn't always have that. And the other thing is, because I don't have to sit there and jump my athletes all the time, they don't get to see that side that, for example, my head assistant intern with Texas with Yancey McKnight, And obviously, they were a little bit more loud down there than I am here, and they're trying to, I guess they were trying to create their culture down there when he was there. They haven't been there that long. And the reality is it's a little rough for your first year or two there. And that's how it was here. And it's just gotten this last, give or take, year and a half, probably about a year, have been much easier. I probably up down the group for football one time in a semester. That was a 2 to 3 times a day thing with multiple groups, and just kept going and going. And finally these kids started to understand. First of all, we had to get rid of a few guys, and we had to bring some new guys on. But as we change that culture, we end up with a really positive group of guys, But with that, I think that's actually what you say is a very loaded question for me, because I think the realization of making sure people understand that this is not how it is, getting other people on the phone to be able to hear their side of the story, I think is good. Again, I talked about my head assistant. I should say his name, Jesse Hurd. He's done an awesome job for me, as I've said, for the 50th time. But he was at Ottawa. I think he programmed for 8 or 9 teams there, 8 or 9 teams. I have a rule that no coach will get more than 3 teams. That's a rule of mine. I will not give a coach more than 3 teams. And why? Because I want them to be able to specialize in their teams. I want them to be able to take care of their teams. I have the rule that basically your teams will come before any other team. So if we have a football group going on and men's basketball wants to do a speed session over in the basketball arena, that is your priority. Your priority is to get them through their speed session. Now, it may only be a 20-minute deal, and you might be back here for most of football, but that's okay with me. You've got your priorities, and my priorities take my teams, and your priorities are going to be your teams. And that's one thing that I've created here that I think is not necessarily fair to a lot of other schools. When you hear, other schools in our conference with 1 strength coach, we're the only we're the only school in this whole conference with 2 full-time strength coaches. Everyone else has a couple GAs. Half our schools still don't even have full-time strength coaches. And, it's crazy that schools operating at such a high level in Division II, they didn't even have a full-time guy. I mean, you're basically throwing, what on the wall and hoping it sticks sometimes when you don't have a full-time guy. Plus, dear God, with the amount of lawsuits and everything going on currently, it's just insane. But yeah, I think the short answer is we try to get people to come in and give their experience a little bit more, especially at the conference, let some of our interns meet some guys at the conference, do stuff like that. And then in addition to that, let them know, we're kind of a different beast than a lot of schools. We do things very different. I'm a pretty chill guy for the most part now. I get pissed off just like anyone else, but at the end of the day, we try to make sure everyone's treated pretty well around here. And some people are going to use you and throw you away a little bit more than others, and get them to realize that. So.
No, it's always an interesting kind of thought about that. Obviously I've been at 7 schools now, so we're pretty close in how many places we've seen and how different places operate. Probably seen just the same as you, seen the good, the bad, the ugly, some programs that are operating well, and then kind of the same that we've been talking obviously a lot with the culture, seeing a strength coach that's been there with 3 teams, but a new sport coach comes in that's really trying to, hey, this is what I want my team to look like. This is the culture I want to develop. And it's interesting to see that coach try to develop and really foster those relationships with the athletes and build it. And then the next one come in. I remember when I was with one of my coaches at American, see his volleyball girls who had won conference 7 years in a row, see them come in, and he can basically sit back and eat a sandwich and close his eyes. And those girls will get so strong and put more weight on the bar and challenge each other and talk shit, and then take their shakes and leave. And then to see another team come in and have to be spoon fed everything. It's wild to kind of see that stuff. And it's interesting to kind of hear more coaches that don't get an opportunity to spend at a place for 3 or 5 years. And I think that was when I got my last stop at Fresno. It was the first time I've ever lived in a place for more than 4 years in a row in my entire life. So it was interesting to finally see what 5 years looked like. And I remember what year 1 was, and it was chaos. And year 2 was, okay, 1/4 of the team is gone, 3/4 kind of return, maybe, or maybe it's a half if we cut a bunch. And it's chaos and new chaos. And then finally, like year 5, like 3 rolled around, and 4 and 5, and it was like, all right, we're kind of clicking now. Like we know what we want to do, and we know like what the direction we want to go. So now kind of with you, is there any formal thing that you kind of thinking about this step process with like actually leading change now going into year 4? Is there anything formally that you kind of do to revisit or kind of reevaluate the goals for your program, stepping into the next season now that it's been established a little bit more?
Yeah, and for me, I think this is kind of a weird question and a weird answer, because when I look at it, this we always try to get our little mantras and our little things, and this year was, for football especially. I hate always just talking about football, but that's where I probably want to talk about men's basketball a little bit as well, because this last year I led men's basketball, baseball, and football. Those are my 3 teams. I told you we don't go more than 3 teams. But going into it, now I assist with a bunch of teams. I still help out with everything, but I only program for football. We've been able to change that a whole lot. That we've created some different stuff that have really helped move our culture along. One thing I was a little worried about doing that I thought was kind of interesting is we developed a 3-step or a 3-program system. So basically, and I basically used a little bit of my weightlifting background and did a Sinclair. We basically took all of our guys and we put them into our gray, our blue, and our gold group. The goal is to obviously get into the gold group. Our gray group is our developmental group, and then our blue group is kind of our, it's not easy to get in here, but at the same time, like, you still got room to grow. What we do with that is we kind of change our focus every week. So I don't want to get into too much, but our strongest guys need the least amount of focus on strength. So we do a lot more speed work with them, a little bit more power, and then a lot less strength. Our blue group, we do a lot more power, a little bit less speed, and a little bit less strength overall. And then our gray group is very much strength oriented. So yeah, we'll get a little bit of speed here. And I do a ton with VBT. I mean, we've spent the last 12 months, I would say 75% of our programming is based off of either adjustment sets of VBT or something similar to that. I love VBT, and it has created something I think it's really funny. We had a really big drive against, I'll say it was Washita, and we did quite well against top 5 teams. Let's just say we beat both the top 5 teams we were playing Washita, and our running back got hit. It was 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, something like that, got hit in the backfield. And the whole other team starts celebrating. And so now our running back at the time we had the ball was about a 600-pound squatter. And our O-line averaged over a 600-pound squat and over a 400-pound bench up front. Okay, these guys are insanely strong. We had a 500-pound bencher. Okay, our left tackle was a 500-pound bencher. And all of a sudden, our running back starts churning his legs. And I'll never forget this. And I never want to be that guy, but I'm going to do this one. But one of their DNs starts celebrating. He completely gets out of the play and starts celebrating. And he turns around, and the pile just starts moving. And it's just slowly, first down. And everybody, like the whole other team, just was like, what just happened? And our guys on the sideline, they just started like, VBT, going insane. Like, well, that probably helps when you can produce more force, because we do it so much. But yeah, that was one of I love that story. That's probably my favorite coaching moment I've ever had. But that's one thing. So with our groups, we do so much VBT with that, and putting guys in groups, it gives them a little bit more incentive to. It's hard to get into gold group. I think we only have like maybe 8-10 guys in their max right now, and in order to get in that, you have to be pretty freaking good. Like, pretty much all of our guys in there are super. Looking at 2.5 to 3 times bodyweight squats, which is excessive, more than you need to have. Big cleaners, big benchers, And again, I'm one of those guys. I don't like to put more weight on the back of a guy than he can handle. But a lot of times we get to our max days, all of a sudden we had one of our D backs. He's 190 pounds. He squatted 585 pounds, full depth, easily. And I stopped him there. I'm like, that's enough. We had 2 of our. We actually had a squat record set. One of our freshmen, D lineman, big kid, he's going to be a stud for us. Hopefully the other teams understand what this kid is. So he's going to be something that's going to be hard, but squatted 685 pounds, And we're not talking like, yeah, maybe he hit parallel. No, he was well below parallel, so school record with that. But that's the type of stuff that's been happening nonstop, the amount of 600-pound squatters and 400-pound benchers and so on and so forth, all those stats we look at just keep going up and up and up. But I think that started all with this, hey, we're going to put you in groups and don't be in the gray group. Don't be in the gray group. You want to get out of that. If you're in the blue group, you want to get in the gold group. And how we started those standards. The other thing we started doing was a ton of KPI work. So we do competitions. We'd lift Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. We do KPIs on Wednesdays. And those don't take very long. They take it forever for the coaches to do. It takes about typically 3 hours to get through all that stuff. But it went from everything from jumping to change of direction, running, RSIs. Basically anything you can think of is the KPIs I keep data on. And that started to get a lot of competitiveness. Guys really started to compete against each other. I think that's important. I mean, in a really good competition, really, really good program, guys, man, you better not be okay being second string. You better be wanting to get first string because, I really hope we have the problem this year, and we will at some point of, man, this guy's going to start this game, and then this guy's going to come along and actually work so much harder. He's going to start the next game, and this guy's going to be like, nah, that ain't going to happen, and he's just going to piggyback. And these guys just end up being really, really good because of that. Because, man, I'm not going to get beat out by a guy. Well, I'm not going to work less. And that's something I think's created something interesting here that, amount of guys we had that couldn't touch, a 455 squat when I got here. And now squatting over 600, couldn't clean to save their life. And all of a sudden these guys are cleaning 315, 335, 355 with really good technique when before they couldn't even get their elbows to the rack bar at all, anything like that. I think that's one of the best things we've seen. It's just that competitiveness. So I know I got a little carried away. I think I do that with everything. I'm a good rambler.
No, it's perfect. I like hearing about it. It's awesome kind of to see because it's quantifiable stuff that proves kind of the culture is shifting. And now that it's been a few years and the progress, and like you're starting to see the next year come back, and I mean records, big numbers and stuff like that. But like that's awesome. And like to kind of hear the stories of like those like incentivizing moments and like those really positive moments where all the guys are like cheering and everything, that proves that like excellence and like not settling for second and constantly pushing, like that is the norm now. And that is a shift that definitely did not happen in year one. And it slowly kind of took place and it started to just be typical at this point in time. And something like we talked about with the steps, like when you get to 7 and 8, where you have to keep hammering that home and not just be okay with where you're at.
Yeah. And that's one thing we always do is whenever a guy makes a jump from gray to blue, blue to gold, we announce that for the whole team. Like that's something that's supposed to be like, that is the moment. That's basically you going from first string to second string, or excuse me, second string to first string, or third string to second string. You're moving up the depth chart essentially in the weight room. And that's something, we always do call outs. That's a big thing. We always do call outs at the end of every session. Who had a good day, who was over there doing more than they were told to, anything like that. I'm one of those guys, like when I write my programming, if we do, I don't care, 3 sets of 3 at 85%, whatever, that may not line up with a pro pin chart like I use a lot, but or whatever we're doing. And the second set, this guy just crushes it. Coach, can I go up? I'm almost always going to say yes, unless we're in a real peaking phase. If this guy's just chomping at the bit to put more weight on him. And I always make them, I always make sure there's bets. It's always, hey, 50 push-ups. You don't get it's 50 push-ups. And I rarely get to see my guys do push-ups. Like they hit these, and that wouldn't have happened 3 years ago. Guys were afraid of 500 pounds. Everybody thought 500 pounds was a lot, and then we turn around and have, I think, 6 D-backs squatting, 545 or above, like that didn't just happen. These guys are, they built that. They sat there and they understood that when you get the mindset that something's heavy, it's going to be heavy. And I think that was I look back and I remember the first time I cleaned 300 pounds, thinking 300 pounds was heavy. And I'm like, now I look back and I'm like, well, I snatched 341 pounds before, like 300 pounds is not a heavy clean at all, and Now I go back and I look at, watch someone clean 200 kilos and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's heavyweight. I didn't quite get there, but these days I don't clean anymore. I've got an elbow that's kind of froze and only goes about 90 degrees, unfortunately. I would still probably be cleaning too heavy if I could anyways, but.
Hey, I like the way you phrase that though, like shifting the mindset and showing the guys that they built it, and then kind of rewarding them, or more so than that, challenging them and announcing it, so that it's kind of, I forget which step it is. It's like step 6 where you're showing them the little mini steps along the way, that progress.
Well, and the short-term wins,
Exactly.
And I say this all the time. I say with my guys, hey, you don't know when that 5 pounds you put on is going to be the difference between win and loss. You don't know that. You don't know that at some point we're not going to get into a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, whatever it is, and we are going to have to be just a little bit stronger in that team across from us, who's supposed to be the best D-line in the nation, and we're going to outdrive them for that first down. And the craziest thing was 5 pounds made a difference in that drive. It was just very slow. Like, you're watching guys move at probably 6 inches per second at first, and all of a sudden we just start to gain that momentum, and that is the difference in that 5 or 10 pounds. And the same thing with, you may only need 5 pounds to go from gray to blue, but you're not there yet. And then when you do get into that, it might be that training where we're focusing more on that power and that speed a little bit, that does progress you into being that next level athlete that we talk about. I think that's really important to understand. That's something I wish more schools did. And I kind of stole that from Brian Mann, putting him in different systems like that. I know he didn't do it exactly that way, but basically we're incentivizing everything to make, man, you want to be in the gold. Like, that's your starters. That's the starters right there. Your studs are there. We've got a couple of guys that are off the charts with strength and power and speed and all that stuff. And yeah, a lot of those are our best players. And there's a guy or two in there that's not our best player, but he's doing the best he can in the weight room. He's doing the best he can to develop himself. And a guy like that figures out a way to get on the field eventually. Ends up being a stud after a certain amount of time.
No doubt. Or becoming a leader and a role player in his own right. And that's definitely something that probably drives your culture even more forward, even if he's not the guy that's getting his name called out on the field. He's getting it called out in a different way. And for those that don't know and are just completely oblivious, between all the hundreds of shoes behind you and all your talk about how you kind of work with your athletes, like football, the basketball guys, the baseball guys, kind of shifting gears to your own training, how has, I know it's a little bit different nowadays, and I want to kind of touch on what it looks like a little bit now. I know you were throwing some weight around at CSCCA a little bit too, but your experience on the competitive side of weightlifting and really diving head first into that and being involved competitively for a little bit now to current, just staying involved as much as possible. How has that really shaped and kind of evolved your coaching career in tandem with each other?
So I think the easiest thing is get buy-in from the athletes. I think when they see, since I've been here, I don't think I've done anything quite as impressive as I may have done in the past. And, I'm going on 35 right now. I know I'm completely bald, so I look maybe older than that. And I have a long beard, and my beard's, what's going on? I got the date behind the home. I'm trying to remember. September 3rd will be 5 years old, I think, or something like that. And so I've just been growing this bad boy out for a while, and so I look a little bit older than I am. But with my own career, I think the thing that it really helped with was, I went into my first head job at Lincoln, and at that point, I think I was snatching. My best snatch was somewhere around 145 kilos, 320 pounds, and my best clean and jerk was sitting right around 400 pounds, 182 kilos. And it took me 5 minutes for someone to figure that out and to post it everywhere. And I had instant buy-in. And to be honest with you, I still live the life. I'm still obsessed with lifting weights. I probably need to slow down. Like I said, I'm going to be 35, and the body doesn't move the same way. It doesn't recover the same way. But the fact that I can still out snatch a lot of my athletes, even good athletes, cleans, people buy into that. And it doesn't take long for someone to sit there and see what the coach is doing, and that, hey, he knows what he's talking about just because he looks apart, he's decently strong, and yeah, I love it still. I love lifting weights a lot. And that's one thing that, I still love the Olympic lifts, but I told you I got an elbow that does. Unfortunately, this one, I couldn't rack it if I wanted to because my elbow bends 90 degrees now. This one's fine, but a couple years ago, I didn't even hurt it lifting, actually. I actually hurt it. We had these giant putt-putt courses I was shoving in the dumpster here, and I went to shove it really hard. There's a little block in the bottom caught, my elbow popped, and the dice never got looked at. So, needless to say, that's kind of to put the end of it, for sure, to my competitive career. But the other thing it does, logically, Ron McKeefer says in his book, you better be competitive. If you're not a competitive athlete in college, you better find a way to be competitive. And that really got me to the point where, I say all the time when I have people ask me about going to meets and everything, they're always like, what's your goal when you go to a meet? And I said, well, you should have one goal. Your goal is to do the best you can do. That's the same thing I tell my athletes for every single day. If you're not feeling great, do the best you can do. It's not always going to be perfect, but I'll be honest with you, mine was to win the meet. And it did start to get a little stressful on me. I mean, I think I did my very last meet. I always tell this to people, and I want them to understand. You kind of know when it should be over. And my last meet was 2016, 17 was the last one I actually did. I think I was 30. And I went in, I set PRs across the board. I had a great lifting meet, and I had no enjoyment. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. The other thing I do is I get so obsessive. If you couldn't tell by my 162 pairs of shoes behind me, or the fact that I'm at so the one thing I set out to do was through my doctorate, I was going to prove that I can work out every single day through my doctorate with no breaks. And why am I going to do that? Because I don't want to hear anybody complain that during finals or doing anything that they didn't have time to work out. So that's one thing I'm going to do. I'm like my own little study. I actually started this when we opened up this room. It was July 25th of 2020. I've worked out every single day. I had a barbell in my hand every single day. Doesn't mean I went crazy heavy. There's recovery days in there and lighter days and heavier days and all that. But I've worked out every single day. I'm like 658 days or something like that. If you ever read my Instagram, it's got whatever I did lift wise, and underneath it'll say 658 or 668 or whatever it is. That's how many days straight up lifting. So it's July 25th of 2020, excuse me, that I've been doing this. And that's kind of been my obsessiveness with it. But with that, I think it's helped create the buy-in is probably the easiest thing it's helped with, but the competitiveness as well. I've told you how competitive I am, but I'm also very habitual. I like to do things very similar all the time. So days like this, when I'm actually slow, drive me a little bit insane because I don't feel like I have to do it. I can put it off till tomorrow. And that stuff does drive me a little bit crazy. But as far as the weightlifting, the other things, it teaches you the really, really fine details. You can't drop your butt to the floor on a snatch without being in a perfect position. Whether that bar is a hair forward or behind, your feet are in the wrong position, anything like that, you're not going to make the lift. It's just not. So it teaches you the very intricate little details that a lot of coaches never get to. When you're pushing max weight often and you're competing and you really, really looking to win. And this isn't about, for me, it was never about doing my best. I wanted to win the dang meet. I wanted to go freaking win. And I didn't have that mindset the whole time. It started out, I did it. Man, I think it's a good thing for a strength coach to be good at this type of stuff. And it's very intricate. And then I got a little overly competitive in it. And that's actually where I probably got burned out the most was, man, I got to win this meet. So any day training went a little bit wrong. It was like my life ended, And I remember I got through this phase and I just remember how hard it was. How many times I would go home if I missed a lift and I was just shut down. I was shut down for the day, or even the next day of training. I knew I had to just get it for that much harder. But I'd go home and I wouldn't even pay attention to my wife, my kids. I was completely zoned out. I'm just pissed off that I missed a lift. And, that's when I knew my competitive career had to end. I want to be a strength coach. I have my shot at probably being a pretty high level weightlifter. I didn't quite get there. But I was either going to sacrifice my job to be a weightlifter or being a weightlifter for my job. And I decided to go for the job because I think it's a little bit more long-term. Probably a good choice, especially since I can't clean even now. So, but I love the sport of weightlifting. And as much as some weightlifters hate powerlifting, I love the sport of powerlifting. I love watching guys lift big weights. I just think it's enjoyable. It's relatable. And it's still one of those things, I can still feel it. I remember, the way it felt to hit a PR. I remember the emotion it was to, first time I clean and jerked 400 pounds and snatched 300 pounds and, all those things. I think that athletes get that same emotion when they do the same things, whether it's making that big play out of the game, whether I remember having a kid the first time he squatted 500 pounds, like break down and start bawling. Like, by the way, that kid turned out to be an All-American for us last year. And not only did he squat 500, he squatted 615 pounds for us the following year. So a little bit of a difference, but you're also talking about a kid that was 196 pounds my first year. And then the next season he played at 240 pounds. So a little bit of difference there. But that's the type, you sit there and you think about competitiveness and you think about what this does. That's exactly what it does for us, is we remember that emotion when you're doing that. And you see those kids experience the exact same thing, and the joy and the pain and the frustration and, all that type of emotion that goes into hitting PRs and training for sports. And, you can't ever negate the same emotion that goes into wins and losses. It's very similar, that you're done with the game, 60 minutes or more, and you won or you lost. And the same emotions go into the meets, and sometimes a lot worse for me. Like I said, I get pretty extreme into that stuff. I don't like to lose. So I think almost every loss is preventable. That's the way I treat athletics, is we're going to prevent losses. I hate to be that guy. I love winning, but I hate losing a lot more than I love winning type guy. So I don't want to lose. I want to go in and get the win. I don't want to think about losing. I don't want to anything like that. It happens, but I really hate losing. So, but that's my competitive side of things. I could probably go into that for years on, every time I hit a PR in something. It's great these days, but it doesn't happen very often anymore. So a little bit less on that side of things.
Yeah, no, I love it. I couldn't agree more with some of the stuff you were talking about. I mean, similar, obviously not as successful as you, especially on the Olympic side. I don't do that. But yeah, transitioning, I kind of find myself doing that a little bit, not competing quite as often as I was like in strongman or Highland games. Cause I kind of, a big part of it, obviously schedule. Collegiate athletics is rough to try to pinpoint this, and all the maybes that kind of go into, well, I can maybe do this competition. Oh, but it's 6 hours away, and maybe someone can cover this, but if we're still in postseason, I don't know if I could do that. So I just trained for 18 weeks for nothing. It's like I already get a letdown before I even get a chance to prove myself. So that was a hard part to feel, but no, that the emotion that comes with it, like all the effort you put in, same as games, but it's a little bit different when you're on the platform or you're throwing or you're by yourself, and really you're just kind of taking your own training and you're showcasing it to other people, and then you're competing against yourself. It's a very weird kind of feeling, but it's something that, like, I wouldn't trade that competitive fire, and I think it's transferred over. And I think the same thing that you said with the emotion that you kind of exhibit and that happens when you get a PR, it's kind of cool when you finally like transition a little bit out of the competitiveness. You centralize it and start using that competitiveness in your coaching. And now you celebrate and you have that same emotion when an athlete hits it, or when they celebrate a big play or something like that. And I know you and I probably did the same thing. You tried to hold on to both of those for as long as possible. It's like, I can definitely juggle all these plates in the air. But then you start throwing other things into the mix, like family, kids, moving, like your PhD, like me trying to do stuff like this and get more people on the podcast. And it becomes that you have to like prioritize a little bit and realize that eventually I'm going to drop a plate, and I don't want it to be the one that's really important.
Yeah, that's where to me, that's where my family, I grew up, and, I'm pretty fortunate. I've got, especially my in-laws. My in-laws are unbelievable people. Just anything you need, they're kind of there. And I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say I have the exact same support from my family, especially my parents. It's been a little bit different. Growing up was a little bit more, get it done, figure it out, which caused me pretty resourceful, but it also causes other things too. But then the other side, my in-laws are phenomenal people. I tell my mother-in-law all the time, like, she's a welcome anytime, like I'll pay for a plane ticket. We're from Iowa. I'll fly her down here. That's free babysitting for the week or whatever. Like, it'll work out. I'm fine with it. I'm $400 for a ticket or $300. I don't care. Like, I'll pay for it. She can come down anytime. But that was one thing, we move around a lot. That's tough because there's no, when we left Iowa, we'd been in Iowa our whole lives, and I told you, my wife and I went to college together, high school sweethearts, which is kind of crazy because that just never happens. But, I met her in kindergarten. Her mom was my kindergarten teacher, actually. So with that, that's one thing I do struggle. It's hard to not see people the same way, the extended family, but wife and kids, they still take right now, especially doing a doctorate. They take a little bit of the backseat sometimes, and I'm not too happy about that. But got a little over a year left, and I'm done. And I've got actually about 3.5 more classes, and then I'm on to my dissertation, my final project. And I'm hoping that creates a little bit more freedom. It might be way worse, who knows? But that's one thing I think that, it's tough to balance the family. And if you're willing to let that be the plate that falls, then you really need to rethink having a family. And that's one thing that I've been doing my best to make sure that plate doesn't fall, but it doesn't always, I'm still spinning in it, but sometimes I feel pretty dang wobbly. But I definitely agree with the family portion when you get pulled in so many different directions. And even, I think since I've been here, I've got like 5 texts from athletes. So, I've got 5 texts to answer, and those freaking suckers turn into your family too. You know what I mean? Like if I get offered a job and, that time came here, it's tough. It's tough because I got 300, I think I'm at 321 athletes total is what we have on our team builder app. I have 321 athletes, and I'm sitting there like, a lot of them look to us. That's one thing we've created. Our number one philosophy point is servant leadership. That's a huge thing for me. And I will not, if you cannot practice servant leadership, you will not be on my staff. I'll get rid of you. We're here about the athletes. We're here to serve the athletes. And we've created a really good buy-in from doing so. And so along with that, it creates and I got 321 kids text me often. Their coaches, often, and we're trying to take care of them as best we can. And that does create a little bit of I've got my Southeastern family, I've got my actual family, and I've got my extended family, and trying to balance those all out. And on top of a doctorate, assistant AD position, which involves meetings. I told you this earlier, but my boss said, think about the next 3 weeks. We're going to meet every single day until we get all our administration stuff figured out. I'm like, all right, cool. There goes 2 hours each day, right there. And those hours are very precious to me. But at the same time, we do got to get stuff done. I got to understand that, with that role as assistant AD here, I know that's the stuff I want to do. And I told you goals long-term, either athletic director or bigger school, I got to expect the same things. Hopefully the PhD, or excuse me, the DSL is done by then, the doctorate being a big portion. I think it's probably about 30 hours a week I typically spend writing papers. And that's on top of, we don't work 40 hours a week. 60 is a good week for us. So, make that number 6 athlete contact.
There we go. Hey, it's awesome to kind of hear everything. And obviously your plate is super full. So kind of with that, that's a good note for where we're going to kind of go from here. So, but like any good training session, I want to end this show with a good finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions. You can go rapid fire, or you could take your time on them. And then I'll probably throw overtime in at the end. But you ready to hit it?
I'm going to try to go fast since I talked so much already.
All right, here we go. Hey, biggest influence in strength and conditioning and in strength sports, which probably for you is weightlifting.
Strength and conditioning, Jake Anderson for me. I told you he was a big mentor of mine. If you look, I'm trying to think. Big scale. Trying to think who I'd really say at the big level, like someone that everyone knows. I mean, you could go with the chintzy, obviously like super training answer, science and practice answer. Probably Brett Bartholomew. I know that's kind of a weird one because I love the leadership side of things. And then strength athlete, I would have gone with probably Ilya Ilyin for the longest time. But I'm now changing that to, for me personally, Lasha Tallahassee. That dude is doing things that was supposed to never be done. And you realize that dude is 6'6", squatting to that depth and doing all that stuff. And dang near 400 pounds to be that athletic, I would love to have a D line like that. That's my too long of short answer.
No, you're good. That was good. We'll keep the speed going. So you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but when you're not coaching, you're not training, which is every single day, which is awesome still. What are some of your hobbies outside of the weight room walls?
Currently, swimming with my kids is nice. They love swimming. I love weightlifting, obviously. Woodworking. I actually put enough money away by doing a woodworking business for about the last 2 years before I started my doctorate to actually pay for my doctorate. So I actually was selling weightlifting shoes and doing part-time woodworking, and I saved up enough money to actually pay for my doctorate. That's how it's getting paid for. So that's been a nice little hobby of mine, but it's a lot more enjoyable when you're doing it for yourself. You know, I have my whole house, everything in it basically is fully customized that I built. So woodworking is probably my not family answer.
I like it. Hey, so if you were not coaching, obviously you talked about your career goals, but if you weren't coaching right now, what do you think you would be doing as a profession? And if you had a different pair of shoes and they weren't weightlifting shoes, what sport do you think you would have chose?
Different sport outside of weightlifting. Well, that's actually a tough question right there. I'd probably go with, as weird as this is, because I barely ever played it. It might be baseball. I don't know why. Baseball is a very interesting sport to me. And I've kind of developed an odd love for it over the last few years. The tactics and like the really, really fine motor skills. You can take the best athlete ever and put them out there, and they just cannot play baseball. You know, throwing and hitting is a very different skill set from, you can have a pitcher that's got 2 left feet, but he can throw 98 mile an hour. He's pretty useful. And then a different career, if I were to do anything other than what I was doing right now, I've had some very interesting ones, some offers with certain things. But I think there could be a few. I probably athletic administration. It's probably pretty close to what I'm doing. It might be a cheat question, but athletic administration, I thought about, my dad's tried to talk me into it for years because it's such a high demand and still have a high demand. I've been doing it for almost 2 years. But opening up a woodworking shop would actually be enjoyable. I like that type of stuff.
That's cool. Hey, so setting up an ideal training day for yourself, what is like either music that's playing, like your go-to music or PR song, and then post-training meal after like a elbow free PR?
All right, music. That's actually, I am like the most temperamental music person on the planet. I can be listening from anything from, like, this is really weird. I actually had this conversation today. Probably the weirdest thing I'll say in this, and maybe I won't even admit it, but now that it's going to be recorded, I guess I have to. But I listen to Machine Gun Kelly way too much, which is a really weird, like, I don't know why I got hooked on his last album. And I actually, probably any Machine Gun Kelly, as long as it's not his slow stuff, like more upbeat. But then I go anything from like Rage Against the Machine to Audio Slave to, I don't know if I could sit there. Breaking Benjamin would probably be anything. Breaking Benjamin was probably my actual favorite. But we had country on today, and it wasn't like Jason Aldean. It was like slow Texas country, and we're 9 miles from the border or whatever. So I think that kind of throws it out there. But as far as perfect post-workout meal and anything, it's kind of weird because I don't scream this from the rooftop, but I have celiac, so I can't have anything with wheat or anything like that. So a gluten-free pizza. There's one in town that's exceptional. And actually there's several in town that are exceptional, but we've got one that's called Craft Pies, and it's make your own pizza. And you go down there and you get whatever toppings you want. And I basically say, put all the meat on it, put spinach on it because that makes it healthy. And then as much as half of people will hate me after saying this, and then pineapple, because I get my fruits and my veggies that way. But yeah, they make amazing pizza.
There you go. Pizza and salad together. Last one I got for you for overtime. You kind of told me your favorite, like that coaching memory with the VBT and the push in the pile. But for you, favorite under the bar memory?
Favorite under the bar. me personally lifting. So I'm trying to debate whether I want to go with I have a couple favorites. First time I squatted 600 was fun. Like that was an interesting one, but it was the part that disappoints me was it's probably a little too easy. You know, like when that, like, man, I could put 5 more pounds on there type stuff. I'll go with, I front squatted 505 at the CSCCA conference maybe 5 years ago. And Aaron Osmus was there, and it was the Friday morning, it was the last day, and there was like no one in there. It was just so dead, which is, you know, your first, you know, Thursday morning in there, and Wednesday afternoon was like crazy, and Friday everyone's hungover. And I love getting up, and I told you I've been training for a while without a break. And so Aaron was in there, and, you know, ironically, I'm sitting there talking about how much I love Samson, but I'm over there lifting a Sornex, if you get the Aaron Osmus reference. And I front squatted 505. And like, I'm one of those guys, like, especially with squats, like I should probably anything. I don't get real emotional about my PR. I kind of keep that inside. That's like my joy. Like, I'm not letting everyone see it. And don't ask me, it's just how I. And so I racked the bar up, and I hit the lift pretty well too. And he was like, "Man, that's crazy. What's your PR?" I was like, "That." He's like, "Aren't you excited to get all crazy and everything?" And I was like, "That's just kind of how I do things." But the reason why I really liked that was they were putting anyone who squatted over 500 pounds on their Instagram feed. So I was like, "Man, I'm going to front squat over 500 just to be on there." And so I front squatted 505 and to get on there. And with that, I got a bunch of guys that I hadn't heard from in years. So "Coach, you were on, it was pen and paper or whatever it was. You were on there front squatting like over 500 pounds." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's fun. I appreciate that." So that's my under the bar moment, probably. There's a lot of them I think of. 400-pound clean and jerk, you know, 150 kilo snatch. I think I'm one of those guys, I can remember all my PRs probably to the kilo or pounds on every single thing, where you finally hit something, you're just like, all right, cool. Next goal goes in my mind. And I never really like just locked in. I'm happy with that. But
No, that's awesome. Kind of tick it off the box. And then, like we said, like the emotion that's tied to those PRs, it's pretty cool to recount and recall on them, because I mean, it's part of the reason you got in the profession. It's part of the reason a lot of us got in it. So to kind of coach up other athletes and see them kind of celebrate those same things, it's probably why a lot of people stay in it too, to kind of see it keep ticking. So, hey, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. Obviously, you've got a lot of stuff going on. How can people, if you've got some time, or people got questions and things like that, how can people reach out to you or buy shoes or anything else you got going on lately?
Yeah, so you can find me, you know, obviously on Facebook, Instagram. It's Coach_Fears, Coach-Fears, one of those two. I look at it. But feel free to reach out to me. I mean, you know, my ploy that you already says, you know, I do a lot of weightlifting shoes, but I sell them too. So if you ever need a pair, you know, don't come and ask me for a pair of like Power 2s or something. You can find those online for $80. I sell the good ones, you know, the vintage Romalio 2s, vintage, you know, Stars, Powers, stuff like that. But I actually like the challenge, because I look around all day long for shoes, and that's just been one of my things. I love when someone's like, "Hey, can you find me this pair?" And I'm like, heck yeah, I'll try to find you that pair. It might take me 6 months, because some of those are getting hard to find, but I do enjoy that little bit of a challenge. Like I said, I'm kind of an extremist. I love doing, like, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it all the way. I'm going to find that pair of shoes for a guy, even if I have to find them from, you know, I don't know how many pairs I've had flown in from whatever, Russia. I can't get them from Russia anymore, obviously, but you know, flown in from freaking Kazakhstan, and it's crazy when you find a pair of shoes and it's like, well, these are really expensive, and they cost $100 to ship over here, but this person really wants those shoes for way too much money. So, okay, here's $500, get them over here and sell them for more. So, but yeah, the other thing, my email is zfears@se.edu. Feel free to reach out with that as well. I usually try to be pretty good about answering back on things. With a million things going on, it's a little harder sometimes. But you know, if I don't respond fairly quickly, just send me another message. Just say, "Hey, Jackwagon, call me back." Send me a message. But no, it was great being on here. I think it's one of those things, you get to share your experiences with everything, and I think I've got a very interesting story. I think everyone in this field has a very interesting story, and I love talking to people about it. that's even my assistant I talk about nonstop, my head assistant, his story's very interesting, and he's quite a bit younger than me, but he's been through a lot too. He's been through some stuff that, us as strength coaches, we've all been close to, or even, he's gone through some things I've never been through. And it's very interesting to hear his story because, like I said, we all have these very unique stories, and we all have the horror stories. We all have like those triumph, like we got this done stories. And those are the ones that are enjoyable to really to hear both sides of it, to hear like it was just a struggle from here. And then we fought through it. This is where we came out at, or, even unfortunately I had to leave that position for whatever reason. Stories, there's value in that. There's a lot of learning that goes in on that. So, but yeah, again, I appreciate you having me on here. I talked quite a bit today. I was a little bit rambling. I guess maybe it's my therapy for the day of just explaining my situation and everything like that. But, I've been very passionate about helping other people get into this field and anything like that. So obviously anybody who has any questions, reach out to me on that. I didn't even go into almost any of the actual details that we do here. It's all the personal side of things. And, I still think probably my biggest specialty is VBT, stuff like that. I like to think I'm pretty good at programming, pretty good at, we have to be pretty good at a lot of things here as strength coaches. Let's be real. But no, I'd love to share my experience more and, talk shop with just about anyone who wants to. So those are my contact, and yeah, I appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah, of course, Coach. No, I appreciate you coming on. I got to sit back and hear a little bit of stuff. I mean, if anybody has questions, they can reach out, but they can learn all the other stuff if they come intern with you, and or you're an AD one day and people get so lucky to come work for you. I know I would be more than happy to be a strength coach with you running the ship. So I appreciate you coming on today with everything you got going on. It's been awesome.
Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.